This is Malaysia, a seemingly perfect country, home to rich cultural diversity, stunning landscapes, delicious cuisines, vibrant cities, and beautiful beaches. Malaysia seems to have everything, including a functioning democracy and a growing economy. Aside from the COVID era, Malaysia has maintained a GDP growth rate of around 3% or more every quarter for the last decade. So, Malaysia is doing great, but if you ask Malaysians, they might think differently. A staggering 5.5% of Malaysian citizens do not live in their home country, close to around 2 million people. Many have chosen to leave their homeland, and many more don't want their children to grow up in that society. To sustain the population, there needs to be an average of 2.1 births per woman. However, in Malaysia, this ratio is down to 1.73. But why is Malaysia facing these problems? One answer is the country's innate racism that has begun to overrun the Malaysian legal structure. The other is the middle income trap that makes Malaysia challenging to live in. There are many possible answers too, but if you look at the history, one particular group may have had severe influence in this country's modern-day challenges, as well as their success. It's not some ethnic or religious group in Malaysia, not even a political party. The group has technically left Malaysia, and to find them, you have to travel to the other side of the Eurasian Supercontinent. This is the story of Britain's shadow over Malaysia's economic success. What's wrong with Malaysia? According to the former Human Resources Minister V. Sivakumar, around 1.86 million Malaysians are not living in Malaysia, and the number is increasing rapidly. Among these Malaysian expats, the majority, around 1.13 million people, reside in Singapore. Aside from Singapore, other popular destinations for Malaysian immigrants include Australia, Brunei Darussalam, and the Philippines. So why are people leaving Malaysia? According to Deputy Human Resources Minister Mustafa Sagmud, there are three main reasons: social injustice in Malaysia, better career prospects, and better remuneration. In simpler words, better wages for similar work. First, let's understand the social injustice in Malaysia. Ethnic and cultural diversity is beautiful. Different cultures have different specializations, and together they can lead the nation to grow exponentially. Malaysia too is one of the most ethnically diverse countries, with the barely Malay majority making up only 50.8% of the population. Among the larger minorities, the Chinese make up 23.8%, indigenous groups 10.9%, and Indians 7.1%. This diversity could have accelerated the growth of Malaysia as it did for its tiny neighbor Singapore. However, the Malaysian legal structure chose the path of bias and gave special provisions to the majority.
The Malaysian constitution, they have special for the Malay.
Why?
Because this is our country. Chinese come from Chinese, India from India. But originally Malaysian is Malay. This is our country.
This superiority complex of the majority makes the minorities wonder if they are even Malaysian, or if they're even welcome within the country. Yeah, they hold Malaysian citizenship and are Malaysians on paper.
On paper, yes, I am Malaysian, but it just doesn't feel like your own home when you're continuously being discriminated.
But how does that translate to other aspects of their lives? This makes many Malaysian citizens from minority groups choose to leave Malaysia. However, if this were the only reason, many native Malay citizens wouldn't be leaving Malaysia either, which is also not the case.
Is that, of course, the major part of those who migrated is Chinese, but the second, not less large group is Malays. So you see, dynamic might have changed.
This brings us to the other two reasons: better career prospects and better wages. Malaysia has an unemployment rate of 3.2%, which is good until you compare it with neighboring Singapore, which stands at only 2%. It's not just that Singapore offers a higher number of job opportunities, but also much better wages. To understand the difference, let's look at how this guy's life changed after moving from Malaysia to Singapore.
Today, working in Singapore, he makes about 4 times more.
Boleh beli 2 rumah, boleh beli kereta ke, macam nak beli motor pun boleh bayar cash. Macam gitu. Kalau kat sini kita motor pun kita biasa buat loan kan. Loan kedai lah apa kan. Tapi kalau sana motor dah tak okey nak beli. Terus beli. Tu tak payah nak buat loan apa kan. Kira gaji 1 bulan tu dah kita dah boleh beli apa kita nak beli. dapat simpan. Alhamdulillah kalau
Not every Malaysian is leaving. Many are staying, but even those who are staying don't want to have children there, which means its population might decline in the future. According to 2018 stats, the fertility rate of Malay women of childbearing age in Malaysia was 2.4 births per woman, which is above the replacement level. However, among minorities, it's as low as 1.1 and 1.3 for Chinese and Indians. But why is Malaysia facing these problems? Well, the short answer may be tied to their British colonial past. We'll discuss exactly how, but before that, if you're interested by these and other economic stories, be sure to subscribe. British Malayan capitalism. To understand, let's rewind and take a look at history. British occupation of Malaysia began in 1874 with the state of Perak. By 1909, British Malaya looked like this. All of Peninsular Malaysia was under British rule. The primary aim of the British administration was to create the enabling conditions, including maintaining law and order, for exploiting the Malay Peninsula's natural resources with the use of low-paid local workers. The British were after Malaysia's massive tin deposits and the ideal environments for rubber plantation. However, the locals lacked skills in those departments and stuck to traditional farming and fishing. So the British started importing laborers from nearby India and China, Indians for the rubber plantations and Chinese for the tin mines, while the Malays kept doing traditional farming and fishing jobs. As a result, the percentage of ethnic Indians and Chinese grew in British Malaya, and Malaysia became a multi-ethnic society. The British made sure to use their divide and rule policy to its fullest. These communities had not only different occupations, but also different languages and religions, and barely interacted with each other. This worked for the British in colonial times, however, not for Malaysia after independence. Post-independence Malaysia felt as if it were three different countries living as one. Ethnic Malays, who were indigenous to the land and made up the majority, felt as if the land belonged to them more than the others and made discriminatory policies that exist even today. For example, ethnic Malay people get a 7% discount on purchasing properties, and 90% of university scholarships go to ethnic Malays when they make up only half of the nation's population.
Since there are a lot of competition for that seat, so I have to really outperform from the others to actually get into that seat.
One Malaysian state did not want all this and wanted the racist policies to be gone. The racist policies stayed. However, the state had to go. Yes, Malaysia kicked out a state for protesting against all this, and it became a separate country. That state is Singapore, the prosperous nation that is not just one of the wealthiest economies today, but also a destination for about 60% of Malaysians who live abroad. Secondly, before the British occupation of Malaya, there were hardly any wage workers. Every person was in turn a farmer, fisherman, laborer, or harvester. However, the British took over all the industries and made them wage workers, paying them a minimum wage. At the time of independence, 56.6% of the Malay population were employees, and so were 2/3 of Chinese workers and 89% of Indian workers. This does work in general. However, in Malaysia, the wages have barely increased, and with inflation, it's becoming difficult to live in Malaysia. Former Deputy Human Resources Minister Mustafa Sakmud himself said, "When I first started working as an engineer in 1993, my salary was 1,800 ringgit Malaysia. My son graduated in 2019 and joined a private company as an engineer too. His salary is 2,300 ringgit Malaysia." Although these problems were initiated by the colonial British and locals couldn't do anything about them at the time, today's situation could have been better had the government done something timely instead of making discriminatory provisions. Singaporean leadership wanted to do the right thing, but Malaysia kicked them out in 1965. 26 years after that, on February 28, 1991, Malaysia's then Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, made an attempt to solve the issue and introduced his vision of One Bangsa Malaysia, meaning one Malaysian nation. How successful was it, or how successful will it be? Let's find out. Malaysia, the way forward. We can all agree that Malaysia, as of 2024, retains communal politics and discriminatory policies. Dr. Mahathir's vision of One Bangsa Malaysia, however, was a vision in 2020, so one can easily say that his dream failed. However, it wouldn't be wrong to say that there have been some advancements. Interaction between different ethnicities is becoming more common than ever. And the English language is somewhat serving as a lingua franca, minimizing the language barrier. Interracial marriages are also getting more common. In fact, the number of interracial marriages registered in the year 2019 was almost 6,000 more than the interracial marriages registered in 2017. The multi-ethnic children born from these marriages will be claiming the Malaysian identity more than their ethnic identity.
When I married a Malaysian Indian and when I had my first child, my husband and I felt that we need to go and register the child as Malaysian. Not defined by race because she's of mixed races. We want our child to start looking at issues no longer from the perspective of race.
Although not as good as Singapore, Malaysia does have many opportunities in different sectors. It is one of the largest exporters of semiconductor chips used in all sorts of electronics. In fact, the US imports more chips from Malaysia than anywhere else. Malaysia is also home to a robust banking sector, made up of 25 commercial banks and 16 Islamic banks. Although Malaysia has a below replacement level fertility rate and a high number of people leaving, its population is still growing and not decreasing. How? Keep in mind that Malaysia still has a growing economy and a well-functioning industry. Even if it can't attract its own people, it still attracts many others. So apart from the COVID era, the Malaysian population has never been on a decline. The government is also trying to build a stronger connection with overseas citizens. They launched a project called My Heart, an initiative to facilitate engagement and support for Malaysians overseas. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Malaysia has infinite opportunities or at any time is bringing back the people that left. It also has discriminatory values that it needs to get rid of. But which country doesn't have problems? Malaysia is trying to solve these problems and become a better country. Will they succeed? Only time can tell. Or we can hope so. Before we end this video, let us know what you think. Do you think Malaysia will ever become one nation? And do you think it will ever be able to bring back the people that left? Or will it only get worse from here? Let us know what you think in the comments. If you remained with us until the end of the video, leave a Malaysian flag emoji in the comments. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to stay tuned.